Coming up here on Global Business, China is on a 3-day break for the Dragon Boat Festival. We take a closer look at how this traditional festival is powering consumption today. China and the EU say trade communication remains smooth as both sides signal willingness to manage differences through dialogue. And the Iran-U.S. agreement takes effect with the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz for 60 days. And welcome everyone to Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Michael Wong in Beijing. Well, first up, China begins a 3-day holiday starting today for the Dragon Boat Festival, also known as the Duanwu Festival. The holiday travel rush started Thursday and runs through Monday. Now, over this period, the national railway network is expected to handle about 83 million passenger trips, with the peak day forecast at roughly 19 million on Friday. Now, to cope with the surge, more trains have been added, around 13,000 running daily on average. Overnight, high-speed services will operate on major trade routes, including from Beijing to Shanghai, Beijing all the way south to Guangzhou, and Beijing all the way north to Harbin. Waterway travel is also seeing strong demand, with today's passenger trips projected at 980,000. That is up 2.2% year on year. Meanwhile, the Dragon Boat Festival box office surpassed 100 million yuan on opening day, with new releases hitting a decade high. Well, the 2,000-year-old Dragon Boat Festival originates from southern China. Today, this tradition now powers everything in Guangdong province, from sports and manufacturing to food and retail. During last year's Dragon Boat Festival holiday, Guangdong welcomed over 23 million visitors, generating some $16 billion in tourism revenue. Our Huang Fei reports.
From a centuries-old tradition to a modern sporting spectacle, the Dragon Boat Festival is making waves again, and it's much bigger than the competitions. In Guangzhou CBD, old traditions still thrive amid a modern skyline.
Behind every dragon boat race, there's a story of community. Today, 8 dragon boats are decorated with ceremonial flags and umbrellas. The elders will place rice browns at the bow and stern, a blessing for good harvest and good luck for the year ahead. And now, even the youngest paddlers are getting on board.
My name is Ji Yushuan. I'm 12 years old. Today I'm the flag bearer at the front, waving 2 flags by the dragon head. It's exciting, and it's a great way to stay fit.
I was even younger than him when I started. My father took me to paddle all the time. Now it's my turn to take my son. When he was younger, he mainly paddled. Now that he's grown up, he's ready to wave the flags. We hope this tradition will continue.
About an hour away in neighboring Foshan, there's a dragon boat racecourse unlike any other. Known as Formula One on water, DHL races see teams speeding through narrow river bends and crossing the finish line in reverse. The races have become a major tourism draw. Last year alone, the DHL Dragon Boat races generated more than $47 million in on-site spending. Hotels fill up days before race weekends. Restaurants and shops stay busy from morning to night.
I traveled all the way from Heilongjiang just to see this. I've been here for a week already. The way they make those tricky turns is amazing. I'll stay a little longer to explore and see more of the area.
In Foshan's Jiujiang town, workers are building boats designed for professional 22-person races and shipping them across China and overseas.
We produce up to 1,000 dragon boats a year. We're working overtime every day to fill orders, not just from the region, but from Southeast Asia and Europe as well.
What was once a traditional craft has grown into a thriving industry, and demand keeps growing.
From June to July this year, Guangdong will host more than 200 dragon boat events and over 500 races. Nearly 100,000 enthusiasts will take part.
The Dragon Boat boom is also lifting sales of festival foods, cultural products, and tourism services.
Zongzi represents traditional Chinese culture, and many foreigners like it, too. We combined local soup recipes, creating a new experience where you can enjoy two treats in one bite.
Eligible international visitors can enjoy tax refund and additional discounts at our downtown duty-free store. The discounts can add up to 50% off. Since we opened, we've welcomed customers from dozens of countries.
The government has also introduced $4 million in tourism incentives linked to train tickets, airline tickets, and resorts, encouraging visitors to stay longer and spend more.
Dragon boat racing is often seen as a test of teamwork, endurance, and determination. Now the same spirit is powering a new economic story. Cultural heritage isn't just a thing in the past, it's creating opportunities for the future. Hong Fei, CGTN, Guangzhou.
All right, let's get more on Chinese consumption as the country begins a three-day holiday to mark the Dragon Boat Festival. Chen Jiahe, CIO at Novum Arcade Technologies, joins us now for more. Jiahe, welcome to the program as always, and thank you for joining us on Dragon Boat Festival Day. Hopefully you got your zongzi or sticky rice dumpling in. Let me first ask you, what consumption trends are you tracking for this year's Dragon Boat Festival to gauge the health of the Chinese consumer?
Hi, Michael. Thank you for having me. In order to understand the latest trend of China's consumption economy and the latest behavior of Chinese consumers, I think there are two things that we can closely look at during this year's Dragon Boat Festival. The first very important thing is the data of tourism market, because this three-day holiday is quite important for tourists in China. People use this time to travel around the country. With the efficiency provided by China's very matured network of aircraft as well as high-speed railroad, 3 days is enough for many people to make a traveling to another region. So the data of tourism is definitely important. And for this data, I don't just mean the overall national data, but also the data at many detailed places. This can help us to understand the development of regional consumption economies. Meanwhile, the online consumption data is also a very important indicator. This is because for a holiday that is as short as 3 days, online data would be easier to be monitored. Therefore, by reading this data, we can also better understand the latest development of China's consumption market.
Yeah. Well, Jiahe, you mentioned regional economies. So from immersive cultural tourism to local specialty dining, Chinese consumers, I think, are increasingly gravitating towards really quality experiences. How is this shift, do you think, helping to energize smaller cities and rural destinations? And what role is policy, you think, playing in facilitating all of this?
Yes, the rising of consumption toward personal feelings and experiences is really helping the growth of economies at smaller regions, smaller cities and towns and countrysides. This is because if these smaller regions want to compete against the large cities in the matter of efficiency and price, it's very hard for them because the efficiency is much higher in larger cities. But these smaller regions are actually having better possession of interesting features. These features contain elements of natural viewing, local culture, local history, tradition, etc. With the rising of consumption demand toward experience and quality, this is capable of providing a differentiated supply of tourism experience to the consumers compared with what can be given by large cities. In order to grow economies in these smaller regions, local governments have to play very important roles, because in these smaller regions, the power of markets and businesses is weaker compared with large cities. So the local governments become a very important force to support the growth of these regional economies.
Right, so Jiahe, holiday travel is projected to hit a new record for this year's Dragon Boat Festival, but staycationers are also keeping local spending strong as well. Is this the sweet spot, I would say, for Chinese consumption, where you see both mobility but also community-based spending really reinforcing each other?
Yes, of course. We can't expect the whole country's people to be traveling around. There will be travelers, and there will be people living in local communities to maintain their daily lives. In fact, there has been a saying in the tourism industry that traveling is moving from the place where you have been living too long and getting bored with to the place where others have been living too long and got bored with. So this coexistence of people who travel and who stay tells us about the large potential of China's tourism market. Because China's economy is so large, we have so many cities and so many people living here. Therefore, traveling from your local community to another community, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 kilometers away from your hometown, can be a very interesting experience. And to the global tourists, this is also the same thing. Coming over to China and visit Shanghai and Beijing does not mean that you have been traveling through all of the China. You can still find many different and interesting things where you go to other cities and other provinces. Actually, I have been living in this country for decades, and still there are so many cities and places where I have not been to. It's always a pleasant thing to know that there is something interesting waiting for you to visit and to discover.
Well, I want to be where you are right now, Jiahe, in beautiful Hainan Island. I could use a sunny beach right now. But anyway, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks for your thoughts, as always. Chen Jiahe, Chief Investment Officer at Nova Marquet Technologies. We are going to take a short break. Still to come here on Global Business. China and the EU say trade communication remains smooth as both sides signal willingness to manage differences through dialogue.
Supply chains. How China and the world are working together to make them more resilient than ever. Closing gaps across links. Connecting consumers, businesses, markets, and nations. This June in Beijing, the 4th China International Supply Chain Expo brings the world's leading experts and companies together in one place. Watch CGTN for comprehensive coverage of the latest trends in technology. June 22nd to June 26th, only on CGTN.
China's Ministry of Commerce says senior trade officials from China and the European Union held talks earlier this month, and communication between the two sides remains smooth.
During the meeting, the EU side also stated that a trade war is not the objective of its policy toward China and expressed a positive attitude toward constructive dialogue between the two sides. China stands ready to work with the EU to implement the consensus reached by their leaders, manage differences, and properly handle frictions through dialogue and consultation, expand practical cooperation, and promote the healthy and stable development of bilateral economic and trade relations.
Meanwhile, European leaders are meeting in Brussels for a two-day summit. Major topics include economic challenges, the Ukraine crisis, and migration. Now, behind the scenes, one issue has proven so contentious that officials have reportedly tiptoed towards a trade confrontation with China. Our reporter Zhou Jiaxin has the following analysis.
The Financial Times in a recent report says EU member states are so divided over how to handle trade ties with China that the European Council President Antonio Costa is reluctant to put the issue to a formal vote. The word China, accordingly, may not even appear in this week's summit statement. So why is the divide within, and where are China-EU trade relations heading? To understand the current economic and trade disputes, one must look beyond the European accusation of so-called overcapacity and unfair competition and examine a fundamental structural shift.
With persistent investment and innovation, China has taken the lead in new energy industry and technology. Actually, most of Chinese increased trade surplus with the EU in recent years comes from this sector. The EU still has its own comparative advantages in many industries. But the two sides need to adjust the model of cooperation and competition.
Despite a strong demand for green transformation, the European Commission last month called the rising trade deficit, now €1 billion a day, unsustainable and has threatened fresh tariffs on Chinese goods to protect what reports suggest is the bloc's rapidly eroding industrial base, with sectors such as the car industry under particular pressure.
We must go down this bureaucracy. We must become more efficient in this respect. We must go down with costs. We must also rethink our green policy, because the truth is China is very efficient, so we can't compete under the actual framework in the long run. And so any protection is only a hold, but not the solution to the problem.
When Europe is anxious about losing its industrial age, it has begun framing China's economic appeal as a risk, citing over-dependence and calling for diversification. And Beijing has pushed back directly on that narrative.
European companies make their choice based on cost, technology, and efficiency. How is that overdependence? Isn't diversification in this case just another version of protectionism? This sort of measures will not make the European industry more competitive, and they certainly go against the EU's own stated principles of market economy, fair competition, and free trade.
However, Brussels is not speaking with one voice. Behind the push for tougher trade measures lies a growing rift among typical member states.
I think that France has not much profited from this policy. Germany has a much stronger market economy tradition. We're losing some of that, but in our trade policy, we still follow this stance, which leads to a more open-minded relationship with China on respect what we could do in trade.
Indeed, France recently proposed a European version of Section 301, a unilateral tool modeled on U.S. trade law. But experts say such a tool faces enormous hurdles.
So resorting to unilateralism is against the EU's own principles and spirits. Rather, following the steps of Trump administration, which have hurt the EU significantly, and being criticized by the EU strongly. But moreover, the EU does not have the leverage as the US in terms of economic coercion or sanction. And also, the EU has even deeper interdependence relationship with China.
As Europe's largest economy and China's most important trading partner in the bloc, Germany has consistently resisted the push for hard decoupling. On a recent visit to Beijing, Germany's Federal Minister for Economic Affairs and Energy, with a delegation of 40 business leaders, sought to expand cooperation with China, not retreat from it.
European companies like to be active in China for several reasons. On the one hand, China is an interesting market and the conditions are such that you like to do business there. On the other hand, it is because it is so unattractive to have many things in Europe anymore because of bureaucracy, especially in Germany, where everything is very expensive. But what the state delivers as, for example, as public goods has lost in quality greatly in the last 2 or 3 decades.
So what the EU should do is to attract and utilize as many as resources to enhance its innovation and industrialization capability in new emerging industries, including welcoming Chinese investments and technology in an open and non-discriminative manner.
Complementarity is not a risk, and convergence of interests is not a threat. Over the past 5 decades or so, the annual trade volume between China and Europe has soared by over 300 times, with two-way investment totaling nearly $260 billion. The figures are a strong testament to the robust momentum and promising prospects of China-EU cooperation.
Aside from the formal agenda of the summit, the debate over how to manage the world's most consequential trade relationship after the China-US dynamic will not go away. And China's position remains consistent throughout. Cooperation benefits both, confrontation harms both. The question now is whether Europe can overcome its internal divisions and choose the path of sustainable adjustment over protectionism.
Well, as economic and trade ties between China and Europe deepen, more European firms are expanding their investment and footprint here in China. Our reporter Xu Yi brings us a story of win-win innovation between one of the world's leading pharmaceutical giants and China.
Hi, Emil. Nice to meet you.
Meet with Emil, the executive vice president of Novo Nordisk.
It's always like that in China. Everything is at high speed and high efficiency.
This week, a top executive delegation from Denmark, including him, has arrived in China, marking one of Novo Nordisk's largest visits to the country in recent years.
China is our largest market after the United States. It's my largest market. I look after the world outside the US, so it's critically important.
During their visit this time, Novo Nordisk is launching multiple new moves in Chinese market.
Now we've actually started launching new products in China as the first global market. So we've just launched a product this weekend called Kyonsu. That's a combination of semaglutide and a unique once-weekly insulin.
And this marks Novo Nordisk's first ever global product launch in China, ahead of the US, Europe, and its home market, Denmark. The firm views China's strong domestic innovation edge as strategically vital, alongside its massive market potential.
So we're excited about that, and the global study of how this drug works that we submitted to authorities around the world was actually led by a Chinese professor. So again, showing that now it's not just a matter of bringing innovation to China, it's also a matter of innovating for the world with Chinese healthcare professionals, with Chinese academics. And we were actually the first multinational company to open an R&D center here in Beijing, and we still have a lot of very, very competent colleagues here and keep evolving that. As I said, we just acquired an early asset in China that we are now developing. It's together with the United Laboratories, and then we keep investing. So since we first came to China many years ago, we have invested more than 17 billion yuan here, so a lot of investments. And just this year, we keep investing in our large production site in Tianjin.
And since China launched its weight management campaign in 2024, public awareness of healthy lifestyles has grown. Novo Nordisk is also building a comprehensive ecosystem for scientific weight loss to respond to this shift, such as its WeChat mini program for encouraging people to develop healthy daily habits, which is also based on the company's philosophy and culture. And for Emil, weight management shouldn't depend on medicines alone.
If you're normal weight, then just be happy and go about your daily life. And always focus on eating well and exercising. But it's easier said than done for people who have gained weight. And that's where medicine can help you dampen the hunger signals so you get back to a normal weight. But it's important that you also eat healthy. So not eating, that's not the solution. Medicine can never be the sole solution. I think the weight management initiative and the focus on a healthy China is extremely positive. Also, the government has set an aspiration to increase the longevity of the Chinese population, and that's exactly where we also would like to position our offerings as a company, because it is all a matter of not only helping patients live a better and easier life here now, but hopefully also get more quality and a longer lifespan.
And the 4th China International Supply Chain Expo opens right here in Beijing next Monday. Here's a quick look at the numbers from the first 3 editions. Participating companies grew from 515 in 2023 to 620 in 2024, then rose to 651 last year. Foreign exhibitors increased from 25% to 35% over the same period. Country representation expanded from 55 to 75. Visitor numbers doubled from 130,000 to 210,000. And this year's edition, running Monday through Friday, has already drawn 676 firms from 85 countries and regions. So indeed, the 4th China International Supply Chain Expo promises broader global participation in upgraded digital and tech displays. CGTN's Lily Liu spoke with CCPIT Vice Chairman Lin Honghong, the event organizer, ahead of the opening. The expo is expected to strengthen industrial ties and expand supply chain connectivity worldwide.
Ms. Lin, thank you so much for your time. If we talk about nowadays about global supply chains, I think the keywords would be uncertainty and fragmentation. So what is your assessment of the resilience in the global supply chains today? And also, how do you assess China's role as a stabilizer amongst all this volatility?
Industry and supply chains are key products of economic globalization. Despite some shocks in recent years, the underlying trend has not changed, and the resilience of industry and supply chains remains strong. On one hand, a new round of technological revolution and industrial transformation is accelerating, and the world economy is rapidly growing digital, green, and smart. This provides a powerful engine for upgrading global supply chains. On the other hand, companies across the world increasingly recognize that economies are deeply intertwined. No business can survive and succeed without mutually beneficial cooperation. China has long been participating in and benefiting from global supply chain cooperation. Meanwhile, we have also been a builder and a defender. On the supply side, China has a complete industrial system. Our manufacturing sector has ranked first in the world for many years, and we are moving fast to develop new quality productive forces. On the demand side, China is the world's second largest consumer market and importer, and home to the largest middle-income group.
This year marks the beginning year of China's 15th five-year plan, and we have high expectations for this year's CISCE. I read in the news that this year's event features an AI zone, and also you're expanding your global participation. Could you share with us the key topics and highlights of this year's expo, and what message does it send to the world?
Indeed, the beginning of China's 15th five-year plan period. This is the defining context for the fourth CISCE. We are seeing a great leap forward in international lineup. A total of 676 Chinese and foreign enterprises and institutions will be showcasing alongside their supply chain partners, which means over 1,200 companies and institutions will actually join the show. International participation has grown with every edition, and the share of overseas exhibitors hits new records every year. This year also marks the true inaugural year of digital and intelligent CISCE. We've upgraded our digital technology chain with more intelligence elements and created a dedicated zone for AI. The CISCE Launchpad will release over 160 new products, technologies, services, and scenarios.
CISCE is the only national-level expo with a focus on supply chains globally. What role do you expect the expo itself to play in promoting cooperation among enterprises of all different sizes and cross borders and breaking down industrial barriers?
The CISCE is all about chains and connection. Our core philosophy has always been to foster synergy within and across supply chains, with the empowerment of innovation and for the goal of win-win. First, the CISCE is deepening the integration between advanced manufacturing and modern services. Second, the CISCE is fostering cross-industry synergy. The CISCE is not just a specialized industry expo. It's also an incubator for cross-sector collaboration. Third, the CISCE is accelerating its integration of technology and industrial innovation. The Innovation Zone, introduced at the third CISCE, is upgraded to include the chains of innovation industry, capital, and talents. It is our hope that all parties can use the CISCE platform to expand the supply chain network and deepen industrial cooperation. And our goal is never to go fast alone, but to go far together for a bright future with all the partners.
And up next here on Global Business. The Iran-U.S. agreement takes effect with the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz for 60 days.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
Iran has reopened the Strait of Hormuz to commercial shipping without transit fees for 60 days, and the United States has lifted a military blockade of vessels to and from Iranian ports. Now, this comes just a day after the signing of that memorandum of understanding between the U.S. and Iran. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance on Thursday announcing a 60-day countdown toward a permanent agreement to end its war with Iran. Our Walter Morris has more from Washington.
Thursday, the White House sent a copy of the Memorandum of Understanding to Congress. New images are coming in of U.S. President Donald Trump signing the document entitled Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the United States of America. According to the text, the MOU begins with the declaration of an immediate and permanent end to military operations on all fronts, including Lebanon. In addition to ending hostilities between the countries, the U.S. will end the naval blockade on Iranian ports within 30 days. The document states that Iran will ensure safe passage of commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz. The deal also calls for Iran to dilute its stockpile of highly enriched uranium, and it waives U.S. sanctions. As part of the MOU, Washington and Tehran commit to negotiating a final deal in 60 days, but they can extend that period if they both agree. And Thursday, Vance held a briefing at the White House where he provided more details about the MOU. He told reporters that Iran will only get the economic benefits if they perform. He also touched on Tehran's missile capabilities, saying all countries have the right to self-defense.
Israel doesn't give up the right of self-defense if Hezbollah fires rockets or drones at Israel. The Iranians don't give up the right of self-defense in their country. But we do expect that as part of the final deal, they are not going to be able to build the kind of missiles that can broadly threaten the entire world. And that's what the President of the United States said yesterday. And look, I mean, it's very simple. You can't tell a country, whether Israel or Iran, they're not allowed to have any self-defense. That's not what the President has asked. That's not what the President has requested. But as part of the final deal, what we want to see is Iran not funding regional instability, funding regional terrorism, and of course trying to rebuild their nuclear weapons program. That's the main thing.
And Vance says the technical talks with Iran are set to begin this weekend, but that could change. In a letter to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the top Democrats on the Foreign Affairs, Intelligence, and Armed Services committees demanded more details about the MOU and any associated side agreements. Several lawmakers are calling on Rubio to explain the administration's plans for Iran's nuclear program and Lebanon. After the text was released, several of Trump's fellow Republicans in the Senate raised concerns over the deal, and some called it a major blunder. But the White House says the agreement strengthens U.S. security and drives down energy costs.
Meanwhile, the International Energy Agency welcomed the interim deal, describing it as a positive step for peace and the global economy. Speaking over in Istanbul, the head of the agency said a prolonged closure of the Strait of Hormuz could have caused serious damage to the global economy and urged that the waterway be fully reopened.
This is also good for global economy because, as I said a few times, if the Strait of Hormuz wouldn't be open until end of June, we could be, global economy would be in trouble.
And the U.S.-Iran MOU has continued to boost market sentiment, largely offsetting hawkish signals from the U.S. Federal Reserve under new chair Kevin Warsh. In his first press conference as Fed chair, Warsh repeatedly emphasized the central bank's commitment to what he calls price stability while keeping interest rates unchanged. Markets interpreted that as a tightening signal. However, major stock indexes in the U.S. and Europe only saw modest corrections. Here in Asia, Japan's Nikkei 225 and the Republic of Korea's Kospi Index both hitting record highs at Friday's close. On the commodities front, Brent and WTI crude futures are trading at their lowest levels in over 3 months, not far from pre-war prices, as investors expect energy supply to rise further following the lifting of that blockade on Iranian oil exports. Gold, meanwhile, fell for a third consecutive day. All right, for more on this interim agreement between the United States and Iran, I'd like to bring in John Gong, professor of economics at the University of International Business and Economics. Professor, always good to have you on the program. Let me begin by asking you, how significant is this Iran-U.S. agreement? Does it suggest the Middle East conflict is on the path to a resolution, or because both sides still need to finalize that permanent deal within 60 days, there is still considerable uncertainty? Professor, I think you might need to unmute yourself. You're probably muted right now.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, Michael. I think it's pretty clear that this is indeed one step towards a final resolution of this conflict. We should be precise about the name of this agreement. It's actually MOU, right? It's a memorandum of understanding. Nevertheless, I think this is the first step. I would say that this is a very important step towards peace because this reflects the United States government's position. It's very clear that Washington is seeking a gracious way of exit ramp. And I think it's the fact that it's pretty much mediated and participated by Vice President J.D. Vance and pretty much promoted to the American public by J.D. Vance is a very strong signal the United States really, really wants to get out of this. So I think from that perspective, we can say that we're moving towards peace. And I think the structure of this document is actually quite interesting. It says that at the end of the last article says that pending the implementation of a couple of steps, Article 4, 5, 10, and 11, respectively, with respect to both parties, and then they're going to resume negotiation again to address the rest of this document. So I think, this is actually a fairly practical and also quite implementable memorandum of understanding, a gigantic step towards peace, and I see light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay. And Professor, I want to ask you about whether or not ships may need to have to pay a toll transiting through the Strait because Iran has set up a new authority to regulate traffic going through Hormuz. President Trump, though, insisting that the Strait will reopen toll-free. So what's your assessment? Will vessels ultimately end up paying a fee to transit these waters or not?
Well, I think that this agreement says by itself that, at least for 60 days, the traffic should be free. So nobody should be paying a toll for this. Now, from an international legal perspective, I take the position that nobody should pay any toll for this because this is international water. There's no legal basis for paying any toll here, as long as the passage is what's called innocent, right? This is pretty much the Iranians' position that the ships passing this strait have to be not taking a hostile position towards the Islamic State of Iran. And that's fine. I think as long as these ships are for really commercial purposes, not taking any hostile action towards Iran, it should be free. I hope our government will take that position. We don't want to pay toll for something like this. We have never paid toll for the past few decades. So I think my projection that in the future there should be no different from the 60-day period referred to in the document. There's no difference.
That's exactly what I wanted to follow up with you on, Professor. So of course, within these 60 days, it's going to be transit. The transit will be toll-free. But after 60 days, right now, it's still uncertain whether or not the ships will pay a fee, right? I mean, do you expect after 60 days they will still pay a toll or not?
I think the international community will really push back for this bad idea of having to pay, this toll to pass this strait, for which there's no legal basis. I think there's a reason for, the Iranian side's position that, they need to talk to the armed authorities to work out some kind of a mechanism to facilitate, to provide service, essentially. That's understandable, but that doesn't mean that that's a toll booth, right? So I think for the services both sides provides in the future, there might be some expenses incurred. Nevertheless, I think it's a general principle for innocent passage in international water, there should be absolutely no toll paid at all.
Okay. Professor, real quick, assuming the agreement holds and traffic through the Strait stabilizes, what's your timeline for a full recovery to pre-war shipping volumes? Will it be relatively immediate, or should we expect a gradual ramp up?
Well, I think the document says that over a period, I think it's 30 days, that the traffic should be restored in proportion. I think that's the original words they use. So I would expect that, maybe after 30 days to 60 days, traffic should be resumed, business should be coming back. I'm not sure about, the traffic will be fully coming back to the pre-war level, but I think at least we should be in a situation where there should be no war ongoing, there should be no conflict ongoing, and, things should be restored to normal. And the free passage of commercial vessels and tankers should be happening by that time.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Many thanks for your thoughts. As always, Professor Zhang Gong from the University of International Business and Economics. All right, in other headlines we are tracking at this hour, the Munich-based IFO Institute has kept Germany's 2026 growth forecast at 0.8%, but did slash its 2027 projection to 0.8%. That is 0.4 of a percentage point below its March estimate. That downgrade, the Institute says, stems largely from the energy shock triggered by the ongoing Middle East conflict. The Republic of Korea's producer price index rose 0.8% month-on-month in May, marking the 9th straight monthly increase, a streak that began last September. The uptick was driven chiefly by higher costs in chemicals and financial services. And Japan's core consumer price index rose 1.4% year-on-year in May. That is unchanged from April's pace and remaining below that 2% target for the 4th consecutive month. All right, that's going to wrap up this edition of Global Business here on CGTN. I'm Michael Wong here in Beijing. Coming up next is The World Today with Hona.